Welcome to my paranormal closet, where all the magic takes place. Today's guest is an author of true events and how they affect those involved in the occurrences unfolding around them. Like the stories told by his native Abenaki ancestors, he brings you into the center of the story and talks from his personal point of view. When sharing his Bigfoot experience, he takes the reader on a frightening journey. Please join me in welcoming A.H. Verge. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Verge?
Yes, it is, Eleanor.
Okay. May I call you Andre?
Yes, you may. And thanks for
So
having
good
me.
to have you. Yes, so good to have you here today. I'd like to start our discussion with your book, The Little Englishman. I read both your books, loved them both. They're both very different from each other. The
Thank you.
Little Englishman takes your reader on a chilling adventure where survival is a matter of cunning and wits as you tell the tale of your great great grandfather who was kidnapped off the docks of England, ending up in Quebec, Canada during the 1850s. You share how he was captured by the Abenaki Indians, where he learned very valuable medicinal recipes which have been handed down through the generations and now on to you. Why don't you go ahead and share a little bit of this extraordinary tale and how things ended up for you?
Okay. Yeah, actually, my great great grandfather, his name was Edouard Langlois. And what he did is when he was 7 years old, he accidentally boarded a ship in England and inadvertently stowed away. And before he could get off the ship, it was already under sail, and he ended up in Quebec, Canada. Uh, Very harrowing tale because at 7 years old, he learned how to fend for himself and live on the streets and live under porches until, like you said, he was abducted by the Abenaki and indigenous people up in Canada, hauled into the woods, and, for lack of a better word, made into a slave. By working with the Abenakis, he was able to learn their medicinal recipes. And when he was finally able to escape, he brought all of those recipes with him. Those are the recipes that I have now. And we actually formulated the Tigo Tea Company, and we started putting the recipes out for the world. And it's been an incredible trip ever since then.
Really? How so?
Well, one of our original tea recipes, we had it tested at the University of Bologna, Italy, and it's for diabetes. And what they discovered at the university, which we already knew, was that it helps lower and regulate blood sugar. They just did not expect it to work as fast as it did. And that tea overnight went worldwide until it was featured in the World Tea News. And then we were global. It was absolutely amazing on how fast this came to play.
Hmm, that's amazing. Well, I'm glad that worked out for you. And it's a wonderful thing that you're helping so many people with something that's natural and not chemically manufactured.
Yeah. Nowadays, as if you can go natural, it's really the best way to go because with everything that's in our food sources, you really can't trust too much. So
True.
when you get down to basics, it's the way.
Why not go back to the roots where the indigenous people did those things back then and
Yeah.
try and use nature's medicine to help others with their
Yes.
ailments?
Yes, exactly.
But you went on to write A Nightmare in the Woods, which is about your family's disturbing series of encounters with Bigfoot on your family's property. What year was this and how old were you at the time?
This was in 1976 in Northern New Jersey, and I was 8 years old at the time. Um, Probably one of the most harrowing accounts that ever took place in my life because at 8 years old, we had this cryptid running around our home until we finally notified the local authorities. They got involved, and it culminated to where we would actually have sightings of it, get evidence as far as footprints and damage it onto our property. And then until I eventually walked into it. And because of that, that's when it changed my life. Um, I was never quite the same after that because I didn't realize I harbored a extreme fear of being in the woods because I never wanted to see that again.
You said you
So,
were very frightened of it, right?
oh, petrified. It was roughly 8 feet tall, and I was looking up at it 5 feet away. So it definitely changed my life.
Do you think that
Um,
it meant you harm?
I don't believe it meant any harm, but then again, if you look at any type of, say, great ape or chimpanzee, um, they have the ability to reason and think to a certain level. And with their extreme power and what they're capable of doing, you really can't trust them. So, for instance, a chimpanzee, even though it's roughly only half the size of a human being standing upright, can literally rip your limbs off
Mm.
because they have enormous amount of strength. Um, so, with all of that in mind, I was pretty much afraid when I saw this thing because primates are, for the most part, unpredictable.
What do you think they are? Where do you think they're from?
Well, that's an interesting question because I get that quite a bit. I look at it this way, coming from an anthropological point of view. If you look throughout history, mankind has been searching for the missing link between primate and human since the very beginning. We've never found it. Never found anything that even comes close. All of a sudden, you have this creature that has what we can venture a guess to be the ability to reason and think. It is very cumbersome and large, so it can pretty much survive on its own, and it's avoided us up to this point. I honestly believe this could be the missing link between the two creatures here on Earth, between us and them.
Do you think it's interdimensional?
Well, 2 years ago, my wife was outside letting our dogs out. I live in northeast Pennsylvania, and she saw these two large footprints in the snow that were approximately 22 inches long. Came back in the house and she laughed, said, "That was, how's that?
Okay, so she
Better?"
came back in the house.
She came back in the house and she was laughing and said, "Okay, it was real fun. You guys got me." And we had no idea what she was talking about. So we went outside to see two large footprints. Well, what was really startling is no footprints leading up to them in
Hmm.
roughly 20 feet in any direction. So it's almost like it just showed up right on that spot and then left. So interdimensional, I can't explain how these footprints came to our driveway.
Now, how did your parents feel about the creature back in 76?
Um, my family were farmers, so we kind of tended to do things on our own. Uh, my father became very protective because this thing was hanging around our house for approximately 2.5 weeks. When the police got involved, it was kind of strange because even though they did their investigation, when we contacted them back again, they had no idea what we were talking about. So that's when my parents took the matter in their own hands. My father armed himself, and he was determined to shoot and kill it because he was afraid that it might harm one of our family members.
So
It never
I
got to
imagine
that.
you guys discussed it as a family, right?
Yeah, we discussed it as a family, but it was kind of a an unwritten code that we wouldn't go outside the family with this for fear of ridicule.
Sure.
So we pretty much took care of the problem ourselves, and we were on high alert. Of course, nobody went outside after dark, and it finally ended by we were watching the news, and there were sightings in the next county over of the exact same thing we were looking at, and that's when we realized it was moving on. It was gone.
Hmm. Well, you did say at one point you actually found, I don't want to say lair, but where it was living at one point in an abandoned building of some
Yes,
sort.
yeah, there was a small burned out bungalow community in the woods behind our home, and we would always go for long family walks and sometimes even in the evening, and we were walking through that stretch where the old houses were, and they were mostly just foundations, and we started smelling a horrendous smell, and it was coming from one of the basements. So when we looked in, it looked like a giant bird nest that was like 8 feet long and 8 feet wide, and it was about a good foot and a half to 2 feet thick. And inside there was remains of different small animal carcasses. Excuse me. And that's when we realized what we had stumbled upon, because every time we would smell if the creature was around our house, it was that exact same disgusting, fetid odor that was coming out of the basement.
What would you liken it to, Andre?
A cross between a skunk and a dead, decaying deer in the summertime.
Huh.
It was just a pungent, gross smell.
Now, you said that it really affected your life, and I mean to ask you because I seem to recall you mentioning at one point that you really felt like it kept tabs on you or followed you. Do you still feel that way?
Since that account, we've had 5 more incidences. We were camping in Lancaster County. We had our pop up picked up while we were all inside of it and slammed down 3 times. I ran out of the pop up and I was armed at the time. When I got outside, I smelled that horrible smell all over again and realized it was the same thing. Then there was another account at our home here in Pennsylvania. We started smelling that smell, and we live right on a lake. And around our cove, all of a sudden, all nightlife stopped. There was no crickets, no frogs, nothing. And then we could see what looked like something very large meandering through the bushes around the cove coming toward us. So we got out of there. The last big encounter we had, we were on Route 209 between Milford, Pennsylvania and Dingman's Ferry. And there was 5 of us in the car. My wife exclaimed for me to stop the car, and she kept pointing into the field. And when I stopped, we saw a 7.5-foot hairy, dark creature running back and forth in the field for 15 minutes.
You got a
Um,
great photograph. I remember
yes.
seeing that and thinking, oh my goodness, you should go public with that if you haven't already. Does this mean that you're going to be writing another book?
Actually, we are. I'm actually in the process. I've been writing a few books at the same time. Um,
That's the
one of the
author in
books
us. That's
oh,
what we do.
actually, one of the books I was writing is the history of Tox Island Dam project
Oh,
from the,
okay. That's very
yeah,
interesting. I had that in my first book, if you remember. I wrote about that as
yes,
well. Yeah,
yes. I'm discussing the dark side behind what happened with the forced evictions and the massive suicides that took place. Uh,
interesting read. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. Oh, I'm
and
looking forward to that.
I was fortunate enough to speak to somebody that used to live there, and they were giving me their explanation of everything that happened on a day-to-day occurrence,
Hmm.
and it was absolutely horrible. But
Yeah,
I'm writing about that. I'm actually writing another Bigfoot book from the continuation from what's happened since I wrote the first. And
good
I'm
for
also
you.
writing a book on ghost investigation that I used to do.
Ah, I'm so glad you're doing that. I know we
Yes,
talked about that at one point. Very good.
yeah,
Good for you.
I have quite a library of pictures that were taken, and
Mm-hmm.
I used to cleanse houses at one point, and a lot of the things that I was getting on film were demonic. So I have some horrible pictures of really strange things, but
Mm,
I'm going to put that out as well.
good for you. Why do you think, why you with this Bigfoot?
Eleanor, I've been asking that very same question for years. It was explained to me by a very close friend when he said, "You're native. You have a connection to the earth, and these creatures are native. They have been in conjunction with native culture for centuries." And it seems to pick up on me. I've been asked to do expeditions. I'm actually doing an expedition in May, where
Really?
I'm going out. That's going to be in New Jersey, but then I was asked to do another one in Maryland.
That's very brave of you, especially with how fearful you are of the creature. It's almost as if now you're taking it head on and facing your fear. That's incredible.
Yes. Well, I have to admit, it's a little known fact. When I wrote the story Nightmare in the Woods, I was trying to get the memory out of my mind. I was informed that if I wrote it down, I could get it out, and that would be the end of it. I
Hmm.
wrote it down. my wife took my manuscript and ran to a publisher. And 6 weeks later, it was a huge hit on Amazon, and it just went from there. Now I'm
Mm.
again selling worldwide on with the books, and it just keeps moving. So because of that, I've kind of faced my fears. I'm trying to set it behind me, and now I'm more or less inquisitive as to what happened, and I'm looking at it as an adult perspective.
Well, I can understand why you would hold on to that fear because you were so young when it happened. I know I've shared with you my own personal experience with the spirit that lived in my home and how terrified I was of that spirit as a child.
Yes.
And now, having grown into adulthood, I realized that that spirit knew that I could see it and was just trying to get my attention. And if I were given the opportunity to go back in that home today, I would say I was sorry because I didn't need to be afraid. It was just trying to get my attention. And so we learn these
Mhm.
things as we get older and we're able to deal with it better. So now you say
Yes.
you're writing these three books and you have this expedition. Tell me more about the expedition. You're going to do them both? You said you were going to do one in New Jersey, one in Maryland, or
Yeah, I'm doing one in New Jersey. That one I was asked to go through Stoke State Forest and again down Old Mine Road, all through that area, and also other parts of Branchville, um, for places that I know are hotspots. I mean, I've seen numerous nests when I'm out, and one recognizing these things, being able to understand the signs. Okay,
okay,
you hear
understanding the
me?
signs.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, you once you start seeing these things, you understand the signs and you know what to look for. Whereas most people just drive by. Now, the day that we saw the creature on Route 209, we were one of many cars driving on the road, but nobody noticed it. We were the only one that stopped.
Hmm.
So that leads me to believe that most people don't take the time to look around. Everybody's in a hurry, you know.
Yeah. Probably how they're able to evade us so much now because of people being so their heads stuck in phones and computers and not really
Yeah.
observant of the
Yes.
surroundings. When I wrote my books, I've had Bigfoot sightings. You're in the first book, as the public already knows. Um, in more recent years, I've gotten some sightings around Bassett's Bridge Road in
Mm-hmm.
Wantage, across that little connector road where the swamp is. And then
Yep.
in the Glenwood area of Vernon, there's actually a neighborhood. I'd have to look up the name to get it to you, but there's actually a neighborhood in Glenwood that gets sightings and visitations from Bigfoot constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just one house or one family. So you might want to look into that area too.
I
Because
know.
they're still around.
Yeah, I have a close friend. His name is Brian Goslin in Whitehall, New York, and he's the police officer that's in a lot of the documentaries back in the early '70s, where he was chased out of a field by a Bigfoot while on duty, and he's invited me up to show me some of the things up there. And he told me if I want to get a first-hand view of this thing, he knows right where to go. I've been
Wow.
putting it off. I've been putting it off, Eleanor, because I still have a little bit of the fear back. But he assures me that we can see things from a distance. What he said, he goes, every time he goes there, he has a sighting.
Wow.
So,
Maybe if you look at it in a different way, where I was just saying to you how that spirit was trying to get my attention because it knew that I could see it. Okay, we are going to be taking commercial break in a moment, but
okay.
I'll pick up from that point in just a minute.